In the snow-covered stillness of Montana's wilds, where survival depends on instinct and resilience, an unlikely hero emerged to rewrite the rules of motherhood. When Sarah Mitchell, a seasoned wildlife rehabilitator, brought 2 orphaned bobcat cubs to her sanctuary, their chances of survival seemed slim. But help came from the most unexpected source. Sandra, a German shepherd with a heart as boundless as the wilderness itself. This is the story of love that crossed species boundaries, a tale of survival against all odds, and a reunion that will remind you of the extraordinary power of compassion. Stay with us as we uncover the remarkable journey of a dog who became a mother, and the cubs who would never forget her.
The heavy snow fell silently over the Montana wilderness, each flake adding to the thick white blanket that had already transformed the landscape into an endless sea of white. Sarah Mitchell stood at the window of the Blue Pine Wildlife Sanctuary's main office, her weathered hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee, watching as the early morning light struggled to pierce through the dense cloud cover. At 58, she had spent more than 3 decades dedicating her life to wildlife rehabilitation, but the events that were about to unfold would challenge everything she thought she knew about the bonds between animals. The sanctuary itself was a testament to Sarah's determination. What had started as a small rehabilitation center in her barn had grown into a respected facility spanning 40 acres of protected land at the foothills of the Montana mountains. The main building, constructed from local timber and stone, housed state-of-the-art medical facilities, while various specialized enclosures dotted the property, each designed to meet the specific needs of different species during their rehabilitation. That morning had begun like any other in the depths of what locals were calling the worst winter in 50 years. Sarah had already made her rounds, checking on their current residents: 2 injured eagles, a recovering wolf, and various smaller mammals, when the call came in that would change everything. Dave Thompson's voice on the phone was tight with urgency. Dave was no stranger to wildlife emergencies. As a ranger with 25 years of experience in Glacier National Park, he had seen his share of tragic situations. But something in his voice this morning made Sarah's chest tighten with anticipation. "Sarah, you need to get out here now," he said, his words slightly distorted by the howling wind in the background. "I've found something. It's bad. Real bad." As Dave shared the coordinates, Sarah was already moving, grabbing her emergency kit, a large red duffel bag containing everything from feeding tubes to thermal blankets. She had learned long ago that in wildlife rescue, minutes could mean the difference between life and death. The drive to the location Dave had specified was treacherous. Sarah's Jeep Cherokee, though equipped with snow chains and 4-wheel drive, struggled against the drifts that had accumulated on the remote Forest Service road. The weather report had warned of temperatures dropping to -20 degrees Fahrenheit, dangerous conditions for any wildlife, let alone whatever emergency awaited her. When she finally reached the coordinates, the scene that greeted her was worse than she had imagined. Dave stood next to his ranger vehicle, his usual composed demeanor shaken. A few feet away, stark against the white snow, lay the body of an adult female bobcat. Even from a distance, Sarah could see the cruel metal teeth of a poacher's trap locked around one of the animal's legs. "Found her about an hour ago," Dave said grimly. "She's been dead at least 24 hours. But that's not why I called you." He led Sarah to a fallen log about 30 yards from the dead bobcat. Beneath it, barely visible in the shadows of the hollow space underneath, were 2 tiny forms huddled together. Bobcat cubs, no more than 3 weeks old, their spotted fur matted with ice, and their eyes barely open. "Mother must have been trying to get back to them when the trap caught her," Dave explained, his voice thick with emotion. "Found traces of blood in the snow. She dragged herself almost half a mile trying to reach them." Sarah's heart constricted as she carefully examined the cubs. Both were severely hypothermic and malnourished. The smaller one, a female, was barely breathing, her tiny body so cold it felt like ice through Sarah's gloves. The male, slightly larger, showed more signs of life, making weak mewing sounds as Sarah lifted him. "We need to move fast," Sarah said, her professional training kicking in despite the anger and sadness churning in her gut. "They won't survive another hour out here." As they carefully transferred the cubs to the portable incubator in Sarah's vehicle, Dave's radio crackled to life. Another trap had been found about a mile away. This wasn't an isolated incident. Poachers were operating in the area, taking advantage of the harsh weather that kept most hikers and rangers away. The drive back to the sanctuary was tense, with Sarah constantly checking the cubs through her rearview mirror. The portable incubator was doing its job, gradually warming their tiny bodies, but Sarah knew from experience that warmth alone wouldn't be enough. Cubs this young needed more than just physical care, they needed the nurturing that only a mother could provide. At the sanctuary, Dr. James Cooper was waiting. James had been the sanctuary's veterinarian for the past 15 years, and his expertise with wild felids was well known throughout the Northwest. One look at the cubs, and his face grew serious. "The male has a fighting chance," he said after a thorough examination. "But the female, her body temperature is dangerously low, and she's showing signs of hypoglycemia. The next 24 hours will be critical." The team worked tirelessly through the day and into the night. The cubs were placed in the intensive care unit, a specialized room equipped with climate control and monitoring systems. Every hour brought new challenges. The female cub, whom they named Zuri, meaning beautiful, in Swahili, stopped breathing twice during the night. Her brother, Leo, was more stable but still far from safe. It was during one of these crisis moments, as Sarah watched Dr. Cooper and his team fighting to restore Zuri's breathing for the second time, that she thought of Sandra. Sandra had come to the sanctuary 3 years earlier, under circumstances that had seemed tragic at the time but now felt like destiny. The German Shepherd had belonged to the Anderson family, who had raised her from a puppy. Mark Anderson, a local veterinarian, had noticed something special about Sandra from the beginning. She had an extraordinary gentleness with small animals, even those that would typically trigger a chase response in dogs. The Andersons had been forced to surrender Sandra to the sanctuary when their youngest daughter was diagnosed with an aggressive form of leukemia, requiring them to relocate to Minnesota for specialized treatment. They had chosen the sanctuary over regular adoption because they had seen how Sandra interacted with injured wildlife in their yard, somehow knowing exactly how to approach and comfort wounded creatures. Since then, Sandra had become an unofficial therapy dog at the sanctuary, showing an uncanny ability to calm stressed animals and provide comfort to orphaned wildlife. She had helped rehabilitate various species, from fawns to raccoon kits, but she had never worked with predator cubs before. The decision to introduce Sandra to the Bobcat cubs was met with skepticism from some staff members. Dr. Cooper, in particular, had reservations. "These aren't domesticated animals, Sarah," he warned. "They're wild predators. Even at this age, their instincts are different from the other animals Sandra has worked with." But Sarah's instincts were telling her this might be their only chance, particularly for Zuri. The little female cub was failing to thrive despite their best medical interventions. She wouldn't take the bottle, her temperature remained unstable, and her will to live seemed to be fading. The introduction was carefully planned. They set up a special enclosure in the nursery building, equipped with cameras and observation windows. The space was designed to allow for both close contact and safe separation if needed. Sandra was brought in first, allowed to familiarize herself with the space while the cubs remained in their incubator. What happened next would be documented in numerous veterinary journals and wildlife rehabilitation papers. Sandra's reaction to the cubs defied every expectation. Instead of showing excitement or anxiety, she became incredibly still, watching the incubator with an intensity that spoke of something deeper than mere curiosity. When they finally placed the cubs near her, Sandra's maternal instincts took over in a way that left everyone speechless. She began to gently clean the cubs, her movements so tender that even Dr. Cooper was moved to tears. But it was her specific attention to Zuri that proved most remarkable. The female cub, who had been unresponsive to all previous attempts at feeding, suddenly showed interest in the bottle when nestled against Sandra's warm body. The German Shepherd would nudge her gently, encouraging her to eat, then clean her afterward just as a mother bobcat would do. Over the next few weeks, Sandra became the cubs' surrogate mother in every sense. She stayed with them constantly, only leaving for brief necessary breaks. Under her care, both cubs began to flourish. Leo grew stronger each day, his personality emerging as playful and adventurous. Suri, though still smaller than her brother, transformed from a barely surviving cub into an active, engaged kit. The sanctuary staff maintained careful protocols to ensure the cubs wouldn't become too domesticated. While Sandra provided the emotional support and basic nurturing they needed, their care was structured to prepare them for eventual release. They were fed a specialized diet formulated for wild bobcats, and human contact was kept to a minimum. Word of the unusual family spread throughout the wildlife rehabilitation community. Researchers and scientists began visiting the sanctuary to document this unprecedented case of cross-species fostering. Dr. Elena Martinez, a leading expert in wild felid behavior from the University of Montana, became a regular presence, conducting detailed observations of the interactions between Sandra and the cubs. "What we're witnessing here is extraordinary," Dr. Martinez noted in her research journal. "The cubs are developing all the natural behaviors we would expect to see in bobcat kittens raised by their biological mother, yet they're learning these behaviors from a domestic dog. Sandra seems to instinctively understand how to encourage their wild nature while providing the nurturing they need." As spring arrived, bringing with it the first warm days of the year, the cubs' development accelerated. They began showing hunting behaviors, stalking birds through their enclosure window and pouncing on enrichment toys. Sandra watched these developments with what seemed like pride, though she would still intervene if their play became too rough with each other. But tragedy wasn't done with the little family yet. In late spring, just as the cubs were beginning to show signs of independence, Sandra fell ill. What started as lethargy quickly progressed to something more serious. Dr. Cooper's diagnosis was devastating: advanced lymphoma, likely present but undetected when she first came to the sanctuary. The decision to begin chemotherapy was difficult. The treatment would mean Sandra would need to be separated from the cubs for extended periods, both for her own safety and theirs. The separation proved harder than anyone had anticipated. The cubs, particularly Zuri, became distressed when Sandra wasn't present, and Sandra would pace anxiously when she could hear them crying for her. During this time, the sanctuary staff worked tirelessly to maintain the cubs' development, while supporting Sandra through her treatment. They set up a special observation area where Sandra could watch the cubs during her stronger days, and the cubs seemed to understand something was different, becoming calmer and more gentle when allowed brief visits with their surrogate mother. Against all odds, Sandra's strength began to return. The chemotherapy was working, though it had taken a toll on her body. Her once thick coat had thinned, and she had lost weight, but her gentle spirit remained unchanged. As she recovered, she was gradually allowed to spend more time with the cubs, though their interactions had to be carefully monitored to protect her compromised immune system. By late summer, both Sandra's health and the cubs' development had reached a crucial point. The cubs were now juvenile bobcats, their spotted coats gleaming with health, their movements showing the natural grace of their species. The time had come to begin their transition to the wild, a process that would prove emotional for everyone involved. The chosen release site was a protected area within the Cabinet Mountains wilderness, known for its healthy bobcat population and abundant prey. The transition would be gradual, using a soft release method where the cubs would first be moved to a large enclosure at the release site, allowing them to acclimate to their new environment while still receiving supplemental feeding. The day the cubs were transferred to the mountain facility was difficult for everyone, especially Sandra. Though her health had improved, she was still recovering, and the emotional stress of the separation was visible. Sarah made the controversial decision to allow Sandra to stay at the mountain facility during the initial transition period, setting up comfortable accommodations for her near the cubs' enclosure. The mountain facility's enclosure was extensive, encompassing several acres of natural habitat surrounded by high fencing. It included various terrain types, rocky outcrops, wooded areas, and small meadows, providing the cubs with opportunities to develop their hunting and survival skills in a controlled environment. Sandra's presence during this period proved invaluable. She seemed to understand that her role was changing, gradually spending less time directly with the cubs and more time simply watching from a distance as they explored their new environment. Her calm presence appeared to give them the confidence they needed to venture further from the familiar, while her natural instincts helped alert the staff to any potential issues or concerns. As the cubs grew more comfortable in their new environment, they began spending less time near Sandra and more time engaging in natural bobcat behaviors. They started successfully hunting the small prey that was naturally present within the enclosure: mice, voles, and rabbits. Their transformation from helpless orphans to capable predators was remarkable to witness. Finally, after 3 weeks at the mountain facility, it was time for Sandra to return to the sanctuary. Her work was done, and prolonging her presence would only delay the cubs' necessary transition to full independence. The goodbye was heart-wrenching for the sanctuary staff to witness. Sandra spent several minutes with each cub, sharing what seemed like a final moment of connection before willingly following Sarah back to the transport vehicle. The cubs' progress was carefully monitored over the next several months through remote cameras and regular observations by wildlife biologists. They proved to be excellent hunters, showing all the natural behaviors necessary for survival in the wild. Finally, after 6 months at the mountain facility, they were ready for final release. The actual release was done without ceremony. The gate was simply left open, allowing the cubs to leave on their own terms. They stayed near the enclosure for several days, gradually expanding their territory until they finally disappeared into the wilderness that was their birthright. Back at the sanctuary, Sandra's health continued to improve, defying the initial prognosis that had given her only months to live. The veterinary team credited her remarkable recovery not just to the medical treatment, but to her extraordinary will to live and the sense of purpose she had found in her role as a surrogate mother. 3 years passed, during which the success of Leo and Zuri's rehabilitation led to the establishment of the Sandra Protocol at Blue Pine Wildlife Sanctuary. The program, which carefully screened domestic dogs for potential surrogate work with orphaned wild animals, helped save numerous other young animals, though none quite as dramatic as the bobcat cubs. Then, 5 years after the release, an extraordinary event occurred that would provide a touching epilogue to this remarkable story. Sarah had brought Sandra, now in her senior years but still healthy, to the release site as part of a documentary being filmed about the sanctuary's work. As they walked the perimeter of the property, they heard a distinctive sound in the underbrush. 2 adult bobcats emerged into the clearing, a male and a female. They kept their distance but showed none of the fear typically associated with wild bobcats encountering humans and dogs. Sandra, who had been calmly walking beside Sarah, stopped and sat down, her ears forward but her posture relaxed. The female bobcat, whom Sarah was certain was Zuri, took a few steps forward, her nose testing the air. For several long moments, surrogate mother and adopted daughter shared a look of what could only be described as recognition. Then, as quietly as they had appeared, the bobcats melted back into the forest. The story of Sandra, Leo, and Zuri became more than just a tale of wildlife rehabilitation. It stood as a testament to the extraordinary capacity for love and nurturing that exists in the animal kingdom, proving that sometimes the most powerful bonds are the ones that defy our expectations. Sandra lived to the remarkable age of 14, spending her final years as a beloved presence at the sanctuary. Her legacy lives on through the Sandra Initiative, which has revolutionized wildlife rehabilitation practices across North America. The program has helped save hundreds of orphaned wild animals through carefully managed surrogate relationships, though none quite as remarkable as the German Shepherd who became mother to 2 bobcat cubs. Today, visitors to the Blue Pine Wildlife Sanctuary can find a beautiful bronze statue of Sandra with 2 bobcat cubs, created by a local artist and placed in the sanctuary's memorial garden. The inscription reads, "Love knows no boundaries, in memory of Sandra, who taught us that family is not defined by species but by the capacity of the heart to love." In the Cabinet Mountains, Leo and Zuri continue to be occasionally spotted by researchers and wildlife photographers. They remain a living testament to the success of their unconventional upbringing, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary solutions can be found in the most unlikely places. Their story has inspired countless wildlife rehabilitation centers to think differently about how they care for orphaned animals, and it continues to touch the hearts of everyone who hears it. It reminds us that in a world often divided by boundaries and differences, love and compassion can bridge even the wildest of gaps. The legacy of Sandra and her bobcat cubs lives on in every successful wildlife rehabilitation, in every cross-species bond that helps save a life, and in the hearts of all those who believe that love truly knows no bounds. It stands as a reminder that even in our darkest moments, whether facing death, separation, or seemingly insurmountable odds, the power of love and connection can light the way forward. In the end, this remarkable story teaches us that mother love knows no bounds, not of species, not of convention, and certainly not of expectation. It reminds us that sometimes the most beautiful relationships are the ones that challenge our understanding of what's possible, and that in the space between what we think should be and what actually is, miracles can happen. The impact of Sandra's story continues to ripple through the wildlife rehabilitation community. In the decades since the events unfolded, the Sandra Initiative has grown into an international program, with wildlife centers from Canada to Australia implementing variations of the protocol. The scientific papers documenting Sandra's case have been cited in countless studies on animal behavior and cross-species bonding. Dr. Martinez, who had documented the original case, went on to establish the Center for Interspecies Behavioral Studies at the University of Montana. Her ongoing research has identified similar cases of unlikely animal bonds in rehabilitation settings, though none quite as remarkable as Sandra and her cubs. The Blue Pine Wildlife Sanctuary has also grown, expanding to include a state-of-the-art research facility dedicated to studying and improving wildlife rehabilitation techniques. The Sandra Wing, as it's known, specializes in developing innovative approaches to caring for orphaned predator species. Each year, dozens of wildlife rehabilitation specialists come to train in the methods first pioneered during those desperate days with Leo and Zuri. Sarah Mitchell, though now retired from active rehabilitation work, still serves as an advisor to the sanctuary. She often tells new staff members about the night she thought they would lose Zuri, and how Sandra's unwavering devotion turned the tide. "In all my years of wildlife work," she says, "I've never seen anything quite like it. Sandra didn't just save their lives, she taught us all something about the true meaning of motherhood." The poaching incident that claimed the cub's mother did lead to some positive changes. Increased public awareness and stricter enforcement efforts in the Glacier National Park region have resulted in a significant decline in wildlife poaching. The local community, moved by the story of the cubs and their surrogate mother, formed a volunteer wildlife protection group that works closely with park rangers to monitor and report suspicious activities. Leo and Zuri's success story has also contributed to changes in wildlife management policies. Their case is often cited in discussions about rehabilitation techniques for orphaned predator species, and their successful reintegration into the wild has become a model for similar programs around the world. Recent wildlife surveys in the Cabinet Mountains have shown a stable and healthy bobcat population, with genetic testing confirming that some of the younger bobcats in the area are likely descendants of Leo and Zuri. It's a testament to the fact that saving even 2 cubs can have a lasting impact on a local ecosystem. The bronze statue of Sandra at the sanctuary has become something of a pilgrimage site for animal lovers and wildlife enthusiasts. Visitors often leave small tokens, dog toys, cat collars, written notes, at its base. The sanctuary staff collect these items monthly and donate them to local animal shelters, ensuring that Sandra's legacy of love continues to help animals in need. Each year, on the anniversary of the cubs' rescue, the sanctuary holds a special event called Sandra's Day. It's a celebration of unconventional families and the power of compassion, featuring educational programs about wildlife rehabilitation and the importance of protecting wild spaces. Children from local schools come to learn about wildlife conservation, and many are inspired to pursue careers in animal care. The Anderson family, who had to give up Sandra due to their daughter's illness, found their own happiness in this story as well. Their daughter recovered from her leukemia, and they eventually moved back to Montana. They became regular volunteers at the sanctuary, helping to care for new arrivals and sharing their own memories of Sandra's extraordinary gentle nature. As for the Cabinet Mountains wilderness where Leo and Zuri made their home, it remains a testament to the importance of preserving wild spaces. The area has been designated as a special wildlife study zone, where researchers continue to monitor the bobcat population and document the long-term success of rehabilitation programs. The story of Sandra and her bobcat cubs reminds us that in our complex and often troubled world, love still has the power to transcend boundaries and overcome seemingly impossible odds. It teaches us that family isn't always about blood or species. Sometimes it's about the simple act of showing up, day after day, with an open heart and unwavering dedication. In the end, this remarkable tale isn't just about a dog who mothered bobcat cubs. It's about the extraordinary capacity for love that exists in all living beings, and the miracles that can happen when we open ourselves to possibilities that seem to defy the natural order. It stands as a reminder that even in our darkest moments, hope can come from the most unexpected sources, and that the bonds we forge in times of adversity can last a lifetime. Sandra's legacy lives on in every successful wildlife rehabilitation, in every cross-species connection that helps save a life, and in the hearts of all those who believe that love truly knows no bounds. Her story continues to inspire new generations of wildlife rehabilitators, reminding them that sometimes the best solutions to seemingly impossible problems come not from textbooks or conventional wisdom, but from the heart's capacity to love beyond boundaries. And somewhere in the wild places of Montana, the descendants of two orphaned bobcat cubs continue to roam free, carrying forward the legacy of an extraordinary German shepherd who taught us all that motherhood is not about species or circumstance. It's about love, pure and simple, given freely and without conditions.